Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Piggock-Smith, and on behalf of the Millennium Alliance, I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to the 2016 Healthcare Provider Transformation Assembly. We are proud to be joined by some of the industry's biggest and brightest executives, from the health systems to the solution providers that enable them. Over the course of the next couple of days, you'll be participating in thought-provoking roundtable discussions, stimulating one-to-one meetings, educational workshop sessions, engaging keynote panels, and countless network opportunities at the bar. So please be sure to take advantage of all this while you are here. We encourage you all to engage in our online social conversation. Please make sure to include our hashtag HCT Assembly in your Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and every other social media post. We are honored to partner with the International Data Corporation, our exclusive analyst partner for the Assembly. IDC is the most experienced and most trusted IT advisory firm in the market. Their global team of 1,100 analysts assist businesses around the world in moving to the third platform of computing. IDC's IT advisory services not only advise on the technologies of the third platform, but also on how to effectively lead technology initiatives. Please do take a moment over the next few days to get to know the IDC team. And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Robin Farmanfarmaian. Robin is an entrepreneur, founder, professional speaker, and best-selling author working in cutting-edge technology and medicine. She is currently the COO of ARC, working on the fusion of medicine, science, and IT, and VP at Invicta Medical, a device company for sleep apnea. She is also the co-founder and board of directors for the Organ Preservation Alliance, catalyzing breakthroughs in tissue engineering. Previous work includes being one of the founders of MoreFit, the Exponential Medicine Conference, and a VP at Singularity University. Her book, The Patient as CEO, How Technology Empowers the Healthcare Consumer, is a #1 bestseller on Amazon and also available outside this room. Please join me in welcoming Robin.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I already had a fantastic time at the cocktail party, so everyone I got to talk to, that was really fun. So I'll be around for the next 2 days. I'd love to meet a lot of you. So I'm Robin Farmanfarmaian. I've actually said my own last name on stage incorrectly, so do not worry about trying to memorize that. Give you a little bit of background on me. I'm a serial entrepreneur, worked on about 12 early stage startup companies, all in cutting edge medtech, biotech, and education. Now, the reason I decided to become an entrepreneur is because as a teenager, I was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Ended up resulting in 43 hospitalizations and 6 major surgeries. Now, when you're facing surgery, and especially when you're a kid, right? You go from hospital system to hospital system, looking for the very best doctors out there. But none of my doctors ever looked at me and said, you know what, Robin? Let's hold off on these surgeries because you're so young and so much is happening in medicine and technology. No one ever looked at me and said, you know what, Robin? Technology is hope. But technology is hope. In fact, had I had digital health IT, or just the sheer amount of information that we have access to as patients existed when I was a teenager, I most likely would not have lost 3 organs, right? At the age of 26, this is about 7 years after I lost my entire large intestine, I had a total colectomy. My doctors were telling me I was cured, which I wasn't, and they put me on prednisone for the rest of my life, and they put me on 80 milligrams a day of methadone for the rest of my life. And they were telling me, well, you're most likely in so much pain because you had so much abdominal surgery. And I said, no, this is no way to live. I went home that night and I fired my entire healthcare team. I rebuilt it with physicians and healthcare professionals that worked with me as a colleague and a peer, allowed me to be the decision maker, and explained things to me, like actually the breakdown of what these drugs looked like and stuff like that. So finally, after about 3 years, I got diagnosed correctly, put on a medication called Remicade, and after a 13-year battle, part of that being a shut-in, I went into remission, literally overnight. Thank you. So that's what I'm up here to talk to you about. How technology is really now empowering the healthcare consumer to be a key decision maker. When I did this in the 90s, we didn't have a lot of information and access, but today it looks like a much different story. So it's really the convergence of all of these different things, from artificial intelligence, robotics, sensors, computer systems, that is really helping us. So I want to give you a foundation to show you just how fast these technologies are moving. So the difference between linear and exponential, right? Well, if you were to take, say, 30 linear steps, it's about 100 feet. I can figure out, I'm gonna make it maybe to the exit sign, right? You can visually see that. And remember, as human beings, we are born to think linearly. In fact, throughout human history, it's only been in recent times that our lives were not linear. Like you were born and died in the very same area with the same kind of people around you your entire life, right? So we were born to think linearly. So let me show you what exponential steps look like. So 30 exponential steps, you end up actually circumnavigating the globe 26 times, right? 30 linear steps, 100 feet, 30 exponential steps, 667,000 miles, right? Nice visual representation of just how fast technology is moving. And that brings me to something called the law of accelerating returns. More advanced societies have the ability to progress at a faster rate, right, than less advanced societies. In fact, over the next century, it's expected that we are going to have 100 times more improvement than we did in the 20th century, right? So think about the 20th century when cars and planes and computers, these were all born. It was game-changing stuff. We are going to have 100x now this century. And that brings me to something called the 6 Ds of exponential technology. These are pretty much truths around it. So think about different technologies that are coming up in your life. Talking about things like digitization, right? So once a technology becomes digitized, a series of zeros and ones, it actually becomes an information-based technology, and it hops on that exponential curve. If you think about it, right now, we are digitizing everything, our relationships, education, jobs, of course, our bodies. Exponential technology is deceptive, right? Those beginning stages when you're talking about doubling numbers that are 0.01, 0.02, 0.04, 0.08, these are tiny little incremental changes. It doesn't feel like the technology is actually moving quickly, but then it hits the inflection point and essentially goes vertical. Good example of that is 3D printing. So I want to raise a hands in here. How many people think that 3D printing is a 1 to 10-year-old technology? Okay, what about B? Raise your hands. Okay. What about C? 21 to 30-year technology. Okay. We actually have the majority of the room at C. You're correct. It is a 25 to 30-year-old technology. It's just now that it's starting to take over the world. Exponential technology is disruptive. It can take down entire industries in what looks like a matter of months. Uber being a prime example. This is catalyzed by things like platforms, networks, and computing systems, and utilizing the power of the crowd. Right? Another good example of disruption is what we call the Kodak moment. So in 1996, Kodak was a $38 billion company with 140,000 employees, right? Instagram, 2010, born, right? 2012, it was a $1 billion valuation with 13 employees. 2 months before that, Kodak had actually declared bankruptcy. And if you think about by 2020, about 40% of the Fortune 500 companies are going to be disrupted in some way. Now, Kodak are the ones who actually invented the digital camera. This is Steve Sasson. He was at Kodak at the time in his 20s. He invented this amazing thing, right? He's like this huge digital camera. It was 4 pounds. Took forever to actually take the picture. And he went to the management, and he was super excited about it. And they said, no, we're not going to develop this. It disrupts our revenue stream. We are in the paper and chemicals business, right? If you digitize photos, people are not going to spend money anymore on actually printing out photos. We do not want to develop this, right? Well, they just didn't understand what business they were in, right? I think that they were in the business of preserving memories. So how many people, have you all heard of Under Armour? Raise your hands. Okay, good. So Under Armour does not actually think of themselves as a device or a hardware company. They think of themselves first and foremost as a community company and a data company. In fact, they've plugged into IBM Watson, and they are starting to do a lot of analytics. So they have compiled the world's largest food journal database, and they want to do predictive analytics for all of their clients. In fact, they recently hired 350 app developers, right? Would you think about that from something that you had traditionally thought of as a clothing company? And exponential technology demonetizes and dematerializes things. I like to talk about these in conjunction with each other because they seem very similar. So to demonetize, of course, is to take the money out of something. To dematerialize is to no longer need it to exist as a separate unit. So all of us in the room have smartphones, right? We are carrying around over $1 million of 1980s and 1990s technology in our smartphones, right? We've got our encyclopedias, our GPS, our phones, our video cameras, all of that, right? And Instagram. So Instagram's free editing software used to be a $2 million software package 10 years ago, right? So think about in your world, what is going to be demonetized or dematerialized? How many different software products maybe that are too expensive for your organizations or personally for you are going to suddenly be free? And lastly, exponential technology democratizes things. It makes it available to a very large number of people. The fact that an African farmer today has more power in the palm of his hand than President Clinton did during his presidency. And India is trying to do the under $4 smartphone right now. Supposedly it's going to launch in June. Probably has a lot of IP theft, maybe some government subsidies, it could be a Ponzi scheme, but the fact is that India is actually trying to do this. They are trying to make sure that they distribute smartphones to their entire population. People that have never had access to healthcare, education, even sanitation are going to suddenly have access in the next few years to the world's information at the palm of their fingertips, right? So what's it like to be a patient today and in the near future? Well, we're seeing a lot of point-of-care diagnostic devices, which means the diagnostic device comes to the patient versus the patient going to the traditional setting in the clinic or the hospital to get diagnosed. So take, for example, the AliveCore EKG monitor. What it is it fits on your iPhone case, or actually they have a version now for your Apple iWatch. What you can do is you take clinical-grade EKG data using your iPhone case, send the data up to the cloud, where it's going to be analyzed by artificial intelligence, right? And now I can see my physician via FaceTime, Skype, or even potentially telepresent robot with telepresent medicine really taking off. What about potentially getting my medication delivered by drone? Well, we are doing that even here in the United States. There was an exception to the FAA rules, and we had an emergency in Virginia and actually used drones to deliver medication there. But in places like East Africa, where the nearest doctor is a 2 or 3 day walk away, over roads that aren't even passable over 9 months out of the year, or the Himalayas, where there is one doctor for every 10,000 patients, right? Talk about game-changing technology, getting healthcare into the hands that really need it the most. We're seeing drones in other areas. This is a company out of the EU doing essentially flying defibrillators, right? They want to be able to go 60 miles an hour and reach a patient, a heart attack victim, in under 60 seconds. If they are able to accomplish this, they will increase survival rates from 8% to 80%. Wow, right? And this launched at CES this year. Today, we now have flying cars. They exist. This is not the future, this is now. This is a flying drone that carries 260 pounds and can fly for 23 minutes. That's here. All right, so we are entering a perfect storm of technological advancements, really enabling what I like to call the era of the patient. So everything from, say, the medical science, and of course genetic sequencing is not only on the exponential trend, but it is dramatically outperforming Moore's law. 2001, it cost $2.7 billion to get to that first genome, right? Today, we just hit the $999 mark. This is the game-changing mark. This is the inflection point that experts agreed in genetic testing would just be the catalyst, right? So over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see the dollar, if not the penny genome, and we will be able to afford to sequence the world. Talk about a massive amount of resulting big data. We can do predictive analytics, early onset diagnostics, and hopefully a leap towards stage 0 medicine. And the microbiome, raise your hands. How many people have heard of the microbiome in the room? Okay, so what this is the colony of bacteria that live in and on our bodies, right? Symbiotic relationship. We need them, they need us. It's actually, there are less human cells in the body than bacterial cells. Now, the microbiome is different on different parts of your body, whether it's in your GI system, on your leg, on the top of your head, on the back of your arm. These are all going to be different colonies, right? With genetic sequencing, we're going to be able to start to do this even potentially on a daily basis. Now, can you imagine someone like me, I have Crohn's disease. Maybe when I'm in remission, I bank my microbiome, just like you would bank, umbilical cord blood or your regular blood for a transfusion if you're going in for surgery. And then when I'm not feeling well, maybe I get a microbiome transplant back to myself, right? Or there's a theory out there, what about some of these genetic diseases that we always thought were genetic, in fact, turn out to be infectious through the microbiome? And of course, genetic sequencing is catalyzing this. Real-life Jurassic Park. Again, this is not the future, this is today. All right, so we talked about the medical science. Let's talk about the software. And I heard there's a couple IBM people in the room, so hi, I'm a huge, huge fan of Watson. So hardware and software of human bodies, if you think about it, we have not had an upgrade in over 50,000 years. Well, we can with artificial intelligence, right? Actually, artificial intelligence is not a new technology. It's actually quite an old technology. It's also a future technology, and it is a right now technology. In fact, the phrase was coined in 1956, and many people have complained that as soon as artificial intelligence actually works, no one calls it AI again. It goes seamlessly into our lives. In fact, all of us in this room have been using AI on a daily basis for years. And of course, IBM Watson is one of the companies really leading the way in AI applied to healthcare. If you think about the fact that there are over 10,000 human diseases, right? How is a physician supposed to keep up in their individual silos in medicine, let alone the global view of it, right? In 1970, there were only 10 subspecialties. Today, over 170 for physicians, right? You can't keep up with that, but AI absolutely can. And the reason that physicians like artificial intelligence is because not only does it give you the top 3 probabilities of a diagnosis, but it gives you the evidence trail behind it, which is so very important. Now, AI is applied to mental health. We are already seeing it outperform therapists. It's an incredibly exciting area. In fact, as soon as they start to have apps that go in the background of our phones, absolutely, I'm going to be getting one, and I want it to monitor my mental health on a minute-by-minute basis, right? Especially someone like me. I mean, all of us entrepreneurs, we're a little bit crazy. So companies like Talkspace have plugged into IBM Watson's API. What it does is it chooses a therapist based on your personality. It's a very big deal for patients, not just in therapy, but in general. If you go in and you see a physician or a psychiatrist or a therapist who doesn't mesh well with your personality, you're probably not going to go back, especially when you're talking about mental health, and you don't get the health care that you actually need. Well, Talkspace helps that by matching you correctly the first time out. Think about Match.com, but for therapists. And also, it does a lot of stuff by text, so you no longer need to go into an office, right? Ellie is really cool. Again, another company that's plugged into IBM Watson's API, Open API. What it does is it actually outperforms therapists in PTSD and depression right now. It not only analyzes the words you say in response to the questions, but your facial expression, your tone of voice, even the very subtle way that you string words together over a period of time, over weeks, days, or months, right? And there are theories that maybe Ellie is actually outperforming therapists because when you're sitting across from a therapist, although they've been trained to be impartial, right, non-judgmental, you're not supposed to give feedback and facial expression or tone of voice or any of that kind of stuff, they're still human, and they do, right? Or just being across from a human being, you feel judged as a patient, and you're going to close down, and therapy is not going to be anywhere near as good as it could be. But it turns out when patients are sitting across from an AI or just utilizing AI, they don't feel judged anymore, and therapy is actually more effective. And psychosis. So this is really interesting. Turns out about 1% of everyone between the ages of 14 and 27 are at risk for developing a psychosis later on in life. Well, Watson did a study, and it was able to predict with 100% accuracy, right? 100% accuracy, those people that actually did go on to develop a psychosis. Right? That's the app that I want running in the back of my phone. I don't know about you guys. And we're starting to see robots with emotional AI, right? So the one on the left, this is Pepper, came out a couple of years ago in Japan, $1,600. They only made 1,000 units. It sold out in under 60 seconds. The only thing it does is provide companionship, right? There is a huge market for this. The one on the right, I got for myself for Christmas. I saw it. I was like, that's the $99 Hasbro AI-enabled cat, specifically for elder care. Right? And I wanted to kind of see how it's doing. Not bad for a $99 toy, right? And of course, IBM Watson has opened up their API for anyone to use. Whether you are a Fortune 500 company, entrepreneur, physician, patient, whatever, you can now partner with Watson. Well, why would they do that, besides it being a revenue stream? Well, artificial intelligence actually increases and gets better the more it's used. And some of the big guys, of course, are partnering with IBM Watson. In fact, I'm seeing new partnerships come up almost every day across, for my virtual desk. But things like CVS, Apple, and Johnson & Johnson, these are pretty big deals. So if you're not using artificial intelligence in whatever you're doing, think about why not. All right, so we talked about software. Let's talk about the hardware component. So you've heard of the phrase the Internet of Things, right? Well, I'm thinking about an Internet of You. In fact, it's expected by 2019, sensor, wearable tech, and fingerprint analysis market is going to be a $50 billion a year industry. That is 3 times the size of the global music industry. Remember what I said at the beginning, we are now experiencing a paradigm shift, right? Everything is going digital. Give you some more stats so you understand just how fast this particular area of medicine is moving. 200 million devices are expected by the end of the year, and that will double by 2018 to 400 million devices. We're seeing it go mainstream. Biometric smartwear and things like Polo Ralph Lauren. They've partnered with OM Signal to do EKG compression shirts and more biometric smartwear. Of course, Intel has its own version of a smart shirt as well. That is not something I would ever thought that I would say in the same sentence, that Polo Ralph Lauren and Intel are direct competitors in the clothing market, right? Of course, companies like Misfit Wearables partner with Swarovski. They were recently acquired about 4 or 5 months ago, I think it was, for $260 million by Fossil, another clothing company. But we're seeing a lot actually start to enter the clinical space. Companies like HealthWatch, they're doing a 15-lead EKG compression shirt, right, just for the clinical space. Sensoria, they're developing socks that measure gait for neurodegenerative diseases. There are a lot of different areas that you can start to think about with sensors and biometric activity wear, right? We're starting to see wearables get reimbursed. Not your Fitbits, but things like Modus's stepwatch. They measure a number of highly specific clinical metrics around the efficacy of prosthetics and orthotics. And Omron came out at CES this year. It's so exciting, with a blood pressure monitor watch, right? So no longer needing to put on a cuff or anything like that. You just have your watch on 12 hours a day or whatever, and you can program it to be able to take your blood pressure. It's expected to be able to be released with FDA approval by the end of the year for about $200. Now, I love the quantified self movement. In fact, I've been in it since it was a grassroots movement around 2008, 2009, but I'm not wearing a QS device now. Why? Well, my battery died, right, and I've lost it, or potentially it doesn't go with this outfit, which is a huge consideration when you are talking about patient engagement and compliance. Because in general, if a patient doesn't like the way something looks, they're not going to use it. But the cool thing about technology is it makes things seamless. Where I see this going is not just epidermal electronics, so temporary tattoos that stick on your skin for up to 2 weeks at a time. One company example is MC10. They've actually partnered with L'Oreal Cosmetics, and they are doing a biometric patch just that does UV monitoring, right? And the DoD created a consortium last year of 162 universities and private corporations. The DoD themselves put in $75 million on flexible electronics, and then the consortium added another $90 million, right? So there's quite a bit of funding going into the flexible electronic space, which can absolutely be applied to healthcare. But the way I see this going, and when I'm going to start to get engaged, is subcutaneous tattoos, right? Can you imagine just putting in a subcutaneous tattoo that does continuous monitoring? One company working on that is New Deal Design. They're the original designers behind the Fitbit, right? And they're expecting to be able to release in just a few years, not only do continuous monitoring, but potentially even open up smart locks and record who you've seen that day. We're seeing more companies get into the glucose monitoring as well. So Verily is Google's life sciences department. They've partnered with Novartis last year, or about a year and a half ago, and they're doing continuous monitoring of glucose using contact lenses. But Sensimed actually has FDA approval. So it's proof that we can do things by contact lenses. These actually track glaucoma progression. And the EU is seeing a lot going on in diabetes as well. Abbott launched in October last year, continuous monitoring. It's a patch, right? So no longer needing to stick your finger on a daily basis, like every few hours. It just is continuous monitoring for 2 weeks at a time, right? What a game changer is that for diabetes? I'm not sure why the FDA hasn't approved it here yet. And sugar beet is also in Europe. It's expected to get its CE mark by the end of the year. This one, you do need to calibrate with one finger prick, but again, it's just a patch that stays on for 2 weeks at a time. The cool thing about sugar beet is that it does continuous monitoring every 5 minutes. So you get a glucose reading every 5 minutes, right? What a game changer for diabetes. But what about people that, I'm an athlete, right? And I have trouble eating sometimes. It would be very, very helpful for me if I knew what my glucose was on a daily basis, even though I don't I don't have diabetes. And a whole new category called ingestibles. This is a really exciting area of medicine. Now, as a chronic disease patient, especially when you're in the hospital, you are tied down by IVs and catheters and blood pressure monitors and pulse oximeters. I mean, I know I've had them taped to me. I'm like, why am I being held down captive in this bed with like 6 or 7 different tubes? Well, it's a really big deal for quality of life for a patient. And when I get my Remicade, it takes about 3.5 hours to get that IV infusion every 6 weeks. And they have to do my blood pressure, pulse ox, and my temperature every 15 minutes because it contains mouse protein, right? And so that is really annoying for a patient. Seriously, our quality of life. Well, university, MIT is doing a project with an actual vital sign pill. So can you imagine, not just patients, but everybody? I mean, you pop on a daily basis your vitamin pill and your vital sign pill, right? And GlowCap. GlowCap is a sensor on a medication bottle. It's the low-tech version of sensors, if you can think of anything as low-tech with sensors. It has a sensor there. It reminds you if you haven't opened up the pill bottle. It records when you have. This is helpful for people like me. I know when I'm on antibiotics or something, I can't remember. I'll open up the pill bottle, take a pill out, and forget if I've taken it or not, right? So I end up counting my pills almost daily. Whereas this will help, but the very high-tech version of this, of course, is Proteus. So you can see the size of it. It's teeny tiny. That's the end of a push pin. So this is FDA approved already, the sensor itself. It's not on any medication, though, that are FDA approved yet. It's going through approval with Abilify, which is Otsuka Pharma's one of their mental health drugs. So the way it works is that it's made of copper, magnesium, and silicone. And when it hits the stomach of the gastric juices, it creates a chemical reaction that acts as an energy source. Enough of an energy source just to have one signal go out to a Bluetooth-enabled patch you're wearing on your body, which will sync with your app, right? So you can now have your caregivers, your parents, your children, your physicians, your other healthcare professionals can monitor if you've taken your medication or not. This is incredibly important with patients with bipolar or schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, or any of the mental disorders, right? Because these people, either they've forgotten if they've taken their medication or they actually really don't want to, right? And so this is a big deal in that world. And your activity monitor on your computer, it does basic troubleshooting, diagnostics, tells you about your computer usage. Well, I'm thinking about a biometric activity monitor. What would that look like, right? Well, a beautiful UI. And the thing that most of us do now in the mornings is not grab a cup of coffee, we grab our smartphones, right? So I'm envisioning it being able to aggregate all of our data, all of our family's data, and give us insights, essentially a minute-by-minute report card on our health. Now, as a patient, we don't want that massive amount of data raw, right? Because it's just too much for us to handle. We want to know we have access to it, but we just want the insights into it, right? And of course, companies like Apple are trying to do this. There are many startup companies trying to be the platform. That's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a blockbuster, whoever is able to solve this problem. And this is a really cool project. So it has nothing to do with healthcare, but when I saw this, I was like, wow, the implications when this gets on the market in healthcare are going to be enormous. It's a project out of Carnegie Mellon and Disney, and it's using something they call EM Sense, which is electromagnetic noise. It is able to identify and interact with metal objects in your environment. Now, it is able, in prototype form, to identify them correctly with 96.1 accuracy, right? This is crazy. So let me give you an example. Say I'm going home from work and I jump on my motorcycle. Well, I could have a motorcycle. So maybe I jump on my motorcycle. My watch not only will identify that is a motorcycle, but it is in fact my motorcycle. It will automatically turn it on. It will launch my calendar app and a Waze app, which uses the power of the crowd to determine traffic patterns, and it will be able to tell me in a voice command, Robin, you are 12 minutes from home in existing traffic, right? So can you imagine going up to, say, your office door? It'll be able to not only identify that it is your office door, but it can be programmed so that it launches a reminder saying, you know, Robin, pick up milk on your way home. So what are the implications, do you think, in the lives of patients or in the lives of anybody else, right? You're going up to anything and it unlocks automatically for you. Just think about the fact that you don't have to touch so many surfaces. It's game changing. And 3D printing, oh my gosh, so 3D printing is one of the most disruptive technologies across every single industry and economy. Of course, again, especially exciting when you talk about it regarding healthcare. We can now do over 300 materials by 3D printing. And that one up in the corner I love, that is a 3D printed titanium rib cage for a patient who had bone cancer, right? But that is pretty impressive that we can do 3D printed titanium. Now, the main concept behind 3D printing is complexity is free. Let me repeat that. Complexity is free, meaning costs the exact same amount of money to 3D print something perfectly fitted for me as it does for anybody else in the audience. When you're talking about things like scoliosis back braces, this is a big deal. Majority of patients are not compliant with their scoliosis back braces. Not only is it because they're teenage women for the most part, but and they're into fashion and it doesn't look good, but they are incredibly uncomfortable and people have to wear this for months to years, right? Well, with 3D printing, complexity is free. So not only can you do something like 3D print a scoliosis back brace that is perfectly fitted to every single inch of my body, but you have the opportunity to personalize it, right? So maybe I want one in pink with purple polka dots. Maybe I want my favorite rock star on it. Maybe I use it as a fashion piece. And Mattel this year is coming out with a $300 printer specifically aimed for children, right? So maybe I can 3D print my scoliosis back brace out, a new one every single day that will go with that outfit. Think about compliance, right? Of course, we're doing other things. How many people in the room have had a cast in their life? Not that many. How come you guys don't break bones? I've had two. They're incredibly uncomfortable. They're heavy. They smell. You can't get them wet. Well, of course, right now we already can do 3D printed casts. Not only do they have holes in them for scratching, again, you have the opportunity to completely personalize it with colors or shapes or whatever, but it's plastic, right? So it's completely waterproof. And we can do things like 3D printed tracheas. I mean, there's a lot going on in 3D printing, but there is one thing on this page that I want to draw your attention to, is the wheelchair for the dog. Now, why am I showing you a wheelchair for a dog? Well, the owner thought he needed one, and instead of trying to go buy one, actually created the CAD design files for a wheelchair, right? And they're scalable, so he can change the size whenever he wants. Well, he's uploaded those to the cloud and made them available to everyone in the world for free. So now if you need a wheelchair for your dog, you can download these, you can print it out on your $300 Mattel printer, or you can send the files to Shapeways. Shapeways will print it out for you for dollars, right, and mail it to you, and you'll get it back in a couple of days, and you put it together. So 3D printed wheelchairs, right? Wheelchair world was just dematerialized. What other products are going to be dematerialized in your world? And of course, it provides an opportunity not only to not be disabled, but to in fact be super enabled. This is Amy Mullins. She is a double leg amputee, lost her legs when she was very young. She has 12 sets of legs. When she feels like being 6 feet tall, she is. If she wants to be 5'6", she is. She actually, right? She can change it on a daily basis. She has the opportunity to improve on the human form. Why would you, if you were a double leg amputee, have a leg that only turns like that much, right? Why not have a knee that goes completely the other way? Rotate around 360 degrees. You are not limited to the human form, right? You can become super enabled. In fact, she has a pair of legs that allow her to outrun every single person in this room. Do you call that disabled? Right? And 3D printed stethoscopes. This is mind-blowing. There was a physician in Gaza, couldn't get stethoscopes there because it's a war zone, right? So what he did is he created a 3D printed stethoscope, printed out for less than $5. And he says it is as effective as the $200 models you find in this country, right? The most ubiquitous object in medicine just got dematerialized, right? And biological 3D printing. So as he mentioned earlier, I'm the co-founder of the Organ Preservation Alliance. It's a nonprofit. We work with the Department of Defense and DARPA to release massive amounts of funding for companies working on tissue engineering and cryopreservation to eradicate the world's transplant problem. Now, what we're envisioning is a future world where you can do organs on demand. So instead of taking a medication or doing some minor surgery, right, why not just switch out your organ if it's been grown by your own stem cells? Now let me tell you where this industry is right now. We can do 3D printed liver assays and kidney assays to test for drug toxicity. Of course, this helps streamline the clinical trial process. When you think about the fact an oncology drug can be $10 to $12 billion to get to market, I just talked to Biogen. They said some of their drugs cost $15 billion, one drug to get to market. It's crazy. Anything that we can do to start to decrease those costs is huge. Now, where we are in this technology, we are trying to take ghost organs, so essentially an organ, decellularize it, leave the scaffolding in place, leave the vascular system in place, and then repopulate it with the patient's stem cells. So we're hoping that might work as a stopgap measure until we can figure out how to do the vascular system in some of these organs like liver, kidneys, and heart, because they're incredibly difficult. And infrastructure. So just like with banking and education, infrastructure and content are separating. You are no longer constrained to a physical venue just to receive healthcare, right? In fact, we're starting to see the entire world, as I mentioned, get digitized. It's expected over the next few years that an additional 3 billion people will be coming online. Think about the massive opportunity for markets right there, right? And there are a lot of companies putting in literally billions of dollars to make sure that this happens over the next few years. Just a handful of them. X, which is Google's moonshot division, they are doing Project Loon, so they're taking hot air balloons, putting them in the air currents around the globe so it circumnavigates the globe and creates internet for the world. Right? OneWeb has about $500 million of funding. They have partnered with Virgin Galactic, and they want to put 600 satellites into orbit that will give us, wireless. Elon Musk, direct competitor to OneWeb, he actually wants to do it with 400 satellites. Internet.org is Mark Zuckerberg's brainchild. He actually says that it should be a human right? Connectivity being a human right. He has partnered with companies like Nokia and Qualcomm and Samsung, and they are not only trying to make existing infrastructure 100 times cheaper, but they want to increase access with things like drones. All right, so let me just give you a couple of minutes on what does the future of the hospital look like from the patient's point of view, right? Well, a lot of things are going to be moving out of the hospital. As I mentioned, point of care diagnostics, there is a lot going on in that particular world. Why go to a hospital, especially if you're immunocompromised? It's the worst place in the world to be, right? So if you can get the diagnostics to the patient, but we're starting to see blood draws and IVs potentially get out of the hospital or at least become more accessible. Things like VBot. VBot is actually outperforming phlebotomists. It's a robot, essentially a robot vending machine for IVs and blood draws. So it's actually about 3% better than typical phlebotomists. And there are times, I've had over 200 IVs in my life. There are times when the phlebotomist has to actually stick me 5 times. Really? 5 times? I've had one where the actual blood went whoosh. They hit something. But they use special imaging analysis and ultrasound to determine where the vein is, right? Very cool. And Google recently patented some stuff on needleless blood draws. The way it works is it's a cylinder of gas, shoots a microparticle, and then sucks a drop of blood back into it, right? They actually have one for the watch function as well, so that you can do pre-programmed every 10 minutes or every 2 hours or whatever you would like to do, and the patient is not supposed to really feel it. And hospitals are going to have to learn how to provide an entirely new set of services, envisioning a big command center for data interoperability, localized and remote monitoring, and data management, obviously. But what about potentially having the ER as a dispatch center? Because with a lot of these point-of-care diagnostic devices and all of this continuous monitoring, especially when things start to go subcutaneous, we're going to be able to be essentially triaged on our way to an emergency room if we do need to go to the ER, which means you can potentially bypass the purgatory of the 1 to 7 hour wait in the ER and go to the correct part of the hospital where you need to receive care. As I mentioned, one of the worst places in the world to be as an immunocompromised patient is the ER. In fact, when I need to go, they make me wear a mask and sit in the hallway, in the cold hallway, all by myself because they're too scared to have someone like me just sitting in the regular emergency room. And the future of healthcare delivery? Walgreens, CVS, and the home. In fact, this is such a good news for patients because if you think about the fact that CVS and Walgreens are consumer facing, right? You go to a hospital system, these were not built around trying to separate consumers from their money, right? It was not built around trying to get a consumer to choose them over another hospital system. That's just not the way medicine has worked up till now. But CVS and Walgreens, they absolutely do. Not only do they understand how to get a consumer into their store, but from across the street from their direct competitor, right? So pricing, sales, right? Incentives, you can walk into a store, they know how to product placement, they understand queuing analysis, right? All of the things that are really difficult in a hospital system, they understood because they are consumer facing. So this is going to be a game changer, especially when, say you're coming out of the hospital or you're going to a doctor's appointment and you're not feeling well to begin with, right? And then the doctor gives you a script and tells you to pick up some Pedialyte on your way home and pick up the script, and you're like, let me tell you, when you're not feeling well, you're like, there is no way I can stop at Walgreens right now. It is just enough to be able to get back to your house, right? But if you're going across the street, there's no wait. You can do walk-in appointments, and you can buy everything you possibly need right there. This is a huge big deal for patients. And all of this technology is really raising the bar on the interaction between the patient and the physician. So if you think back to the title of my talk, The Patient as the CEO, and I liken it just like the CEO of a corporation where you surround yourself with a fantastic array of vice presidents, support staff, advisors, board members. They do their job, report back to you, and together you determine for a direction for the company to go into. But as the CEO, you are the one who is ultimately responsible that that vision is carried out and that the company overall is successful. Why should being a patient be any different? But the biggest change is going to be among the mindset between the patient and the physician, right? Because if the patient is now the CEO, that's a massive disruption, right? Because the physician is used to being the CEO. How are they going to react? Hopefully a lot more mutual respect, hopefully a lot better outcomes because the patients are much more engaged and involved. But there could be some, pitfalls too, because patients could come in thinking they know more than they do when they in fact don't, or worse, right? Misdiagnose at home and never see a physician. So there are things to watch out for. So I want you to consider some things. Will the data-enabled patient stress or unstress the healthcare provider? No? Okay. The FDA, of course, is not keeping pace with technology. I'm a big fan of the FDA just being able to keep us safe, right? This is a big deal. But it's really difficult to get things through. So how can we streamline this so that some of these life-saving innovations and game-changing technologies get into the hands that really need them the most? And if you're the CEO of your own healthcare team, and I know all of you guys are in medicine, but you are all also patients at some point in your life. So every single one of you in this room are now the CEO of your own healthcare team. How are you going to start to change your behavior today? So just like I did over a decade ago when I stopped allowing medicine to disrupt my life and I became the disruptor, imagine a world where more patients are doing that. To me, the future of the patient is the future of medicine. Thank you. So I think you have time for Q&A? Yes? Anyone have any Q&A? No questions or discussion? I can't see from up here very well.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You are spunky. So anyway, I mean that in a good way. No, she's. I have a quick question.
Sure.
I guess my question is, where do you draw the line? When it comes to technology and it comes to healthcare, I mean, one of the things you showed on the screen was psychosis and psychiatrist analysis.
Yep.
When you look at, you said as far as predictability for an artificial intelligence in psychiatry or psychology, aren't we taking the human factor out of that? I mean, when you look at the computer or the artificial intelligence that's responding to that particular patient, I mean, could they pass a Turing test where the patient feels like they're talking to a human being, or is it when they go out into society and they may have had this kind of analysis by a computer, they can't actually interact with a human being? To me, it seems like technology is amazing. I have a smartwatch, I have Amazon Echo, I have everything I have a smart home. But when it comes to healthcare, it feels like some of the things you were talking about, and I'm not being judgmental, but some of the things you're talking about take the human element out of it.
Absolutely. So the way I address that first and foremost, like when I changed GI doctors inside of Stanford Medical System, and I'd been there for 6 years, it took me 3.5 months to get into my new specialist, right? So a lot of this will help supplement that because I need to see my GI. I have questions right now, right? But also what AI will help do is take away some of the mind-numbing tasks that physicians need to do or healthcare professionals need to do so that they have more time one-on-one to actually look at the patient. I don't know the last time I went into a doctor's appointment, what do they last, 7 to 9 minutes most of the time? And my physician is looking at the computer system and then they turn to me for a couple of minutes and then they go back to the computer system and then they're out the door because they do not have any time to relate to me as a human being. And this will actually free up a lot of their time so that we can have one-on-one eye contact and they can, assess how we're feeling differently than they would have otherwise because they have all these tools and diagnostics right at the palm of their hand.
But, okay, I understand that. I mean, does a computer take a Hippocratic oath to do no harm? And I'm not challenging you, I'm asking you.
Well, what that is it's garbage in, garbage out like anything else, right? So it's the way we're programming them.
Okay. No, and some of the things you're showing are amazing. I just wonder if it's a slippery slope, that's all.
It could be. Right now we have hit so many inflection points that this isn't a maybe, this is a definite. So now we have to learn how to work with them because this is happening. There's no way to stop it at this point.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I can see now better. I need sunglasses.
So futurists are always right and we're always wrong. We're right about what, but not when.
Right.
So the real challenge in many of these things is the timing of business models that support the rapid acceleration of that. So of all the things you profiled, which would you pick out as being the most practical in the next 1 to 2 years for the people in this room?
Sensor technology. So any type of tracking, I'm seeing a lot of companies start to incorporate that. So if your patients have wearable technology, and I don't mean Fitbits, but ones that are more clinical grade, that's going to be a big game changer, right? From diabetes to just being able to monitor things and catch them way before. Because as a patient, maybe you hit 102 fever or what have you. There are things that happen at home that you don't quite call the doctor yet because you're like, is it time to call the doctor? No, I don't want to bug them. Is it time to go to the ER? No, probably not. And as a patient, you have that fight with yourself over a period of 1 to 7 hours sometimes. I know I've delayed myself going to the ER in places where I actually needed emergency surgery. So wearable technology will start to cut down massively on costs and save lives in those cases. Fortunately, my mom was a pediatrician and she saw me crashing or else I probably wouldn't have survived a couple of times because I did put it off.
So I agree with your comments that this is happening, no doubt about that. The question is, for this to happen, I will submit, and I'm not a physician, that physicians have to agree this will happen at scale. My comment or concern is scale can work both ways, right? It can be positive, and scale can also work negatively. I'm just curious as to your thoughts of the timing before you get this to scale on the positive side of the factor.
Well, it's going to depend on which technology you're talking about. We're seeing hospitals already have 3D printers internally so that they can do on-demand therapeutics or things that they need in the surgical suite, right? So it depends on what you're talking about. A lot of the problem with hospitals that I'm hearing about, especially I talk a lot to the OSTP, they report directly to Obama. and they're dealing with data interoperability, of course, and EMRs matching up even inside. I hear in Stanford, my nurses tell me that the infusion clinic won't talk to the surgical clinic, like the EMR system, right, isn't even compatible internally in a hospital system. So this is one of the big barriers, right, and even just, talking between, and the government is actually working on this to see if they can come up with a solution. So if we can find a solution, it's going to be a lot faster, but the way things are going with EMRs, I'm guessing at least 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have to scrap the whole thing at this point or something. I mean,
Does it concern you that the government's working on it? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so 30 years since the OSTP is working on it.
So I love your energy, and I love the fact that there's just so much potential and opportunity with technology. And technology is what pays my bills. I mean, I'm a CIO, so I love the technology. When do we get to the point where the information overload paralyzes us or makes us crazy? And I'm thinking simply of things like the amount of email I get with the number of email accounts I have, and I look at it and I think, this exponential growth of information is making me crazy. If you start adding all of my biometrics into that, I think it might just make us all neurotic or psychotic or something.
So you're just so what I was talking about with having, a beautiful UI and a biometric activity monitor, we don't want to see all that data as patients. I just want the insights. So I want it to function just like you have, your on light on your car or a plane. It only goes on when there's a problem and there's something that needs your attention. So it's going to go seamless, and we're not going to even notice all of the information coming at us because we're not going to look at it. We're only going to be alerted with a text or something, however we want to be alerted that there's something wrong, and not when there's something right.
Yes, sir. Question here? Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for your presentation. Really enjoyed it. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how these things are realigning other industries, and to pick a specific example, a lot of people seem to transition from fitness trackers into health trackers. Also, people like to compare their health status with each other. People talk about health all the time, and they compare their 23andMe profiles or something. So do you see a new chain of economic sectors emerging as a result of these?
Yeah, I mean, all of these technologies are going to require tons of companies to be born, especially things like artificial intelligence. In fact, I'm running a roundtable for the Aspen Institute on AI, and we're going to be focusing in part on the sheer number of companies and people that need to start working as support services around these things. And you see this with any kind of a technology. So it's going to not only increase jobs, but create entire new ecosystems. And we're seeing things like you mentioned, gamification and incentivization, right? So I've heard of some health insurance companies or actual regular companies giving money back on deductibles, on the health insurance deductible, if they are compliant and wear their wearable tracker on a daily basis. This is one that's specific. It's not a Fitbit. I mean, it's very specific to this health insurance company or this regular big company. We're starting to see that, so that's incentives for people to actually be healthier. And then, of course, the gamification component is really, really fun, and that's what starts to get people more engaged because they see, oh my gosh, my grandmother just walked more steps than I did, right? So it gets you off the couch, which is a pretty big deal. Did I answer everything in that? I think.
We're just going to take one more question, then we'll bring out dessert because I know everyone's.
Woohoo, sugar!
So you mentioned 3 letters, the FDA. And when it comes to technology, they may as well be called the fuddy-duddy administration. But they make it so expensive for some of this stuff to get enacted. I mean, I've just had a hip replacement, and there's no question in my mind that 3D printing, personalized of prostheses for total joints, is probably going to be our reality at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
But it will take so long for these things to get through the FDA and then get proven to be better because they'll be more expensive off the front. The hospitals aren't going to want to pay for them. I mean, it could delay it 20 years before something like this takes effect. So, and the FDA is a part of this. So I'm just wondering how you see that it's the hospital industrial complex with the FDA that everything just costs so much money to implement these things of things like that. So I just wanted your opinion on that.
You're right, and the FDA, and I have talked to them extensively as well. I've done, with the organ preservation, I do a lot of work in government with the White House, and so I've talked to some of the FDA people, and if you think about last year, they actually did a life-saving fast track. So if you have a device that is an actual lifesaver, you can fast track it in under 6 months in the FDA now. They're approving apps, I think 16 or 17 last year or something like that. I can't remember the numbers. But they are trying to keep up with technology, and they do complain to us as consumers. They're like, it's just so hard, it's so much red tape. But they are listening, and they do know, and that's why I really like the OSTP. In fact, they're very forward-thinking in government. It came as a huge surprise to me, because when I went in there, I was expecting fuddy-duddies who just push paper around. And the OSTP actually came to me and said, Robin, with all of the autonomous cars, and my prediction is we won't even be allowed to drive in the United States by 2035. It only costs a few $1,000s to make a car autonomous at that point. So they're like, with all the autonomous cars, we're going to have a lot less organ donors. And the White House is already thinking ahead to how to solve the problem that less people are dying in car accidents, and how do we save the lives of people who need liver transplants. So I am actually surprised, and the OSTP is doing a lot in that world, and they talk very closely with the FDA. We good? Cool.
Thank you, Robin.
Sure.
Again, thank you to Robin for a fantastic keynote. And before, I know there's been a few, weather and airlines, of course, a few delays today. There's still some people on their way. But I know everyone's tired, maybe you want to go to the bar. But just a few housekeeping rules to kick things off. Breakfast will be at 7 a.m. tomorrow in the Austin room, which is the one at the end of this, area. During this time, you will receive your full itinerary for the 2 days of business. The Millennium Alliance staff will have a table set up right outside breakfast where you can pick up your packets. And we will kick off tomorrow with a keynote breakfast panel moderated by Brian Ahir, the Director of Standards and Government Affairs at Medicity. The Healthcare Provider Transformation Assembly is intended to be very interactive. All our keynotes and workshops will include Q&A sessions, so please get involved. Lastly, the Millennium Alliance will have a desk, as I said, outside of this room. It'll be there for the next few days. All the Millennium Alliance staff have red lanyards like mine. And please do not hesitate to ask us any questions at any time. And I hope everyone has a fantastic night. Continue networking, get some sleep, and we'll see you all in the morning. Thank you.
Woohoo! Maybe we'll pick off my microphone.